US President Joe Biden is meeting Chinese President Xi Jinping after more than a year. Let's take a look at all that has happened since their last meeting to understand just how crucial this meeting is going to be. Now, President Biden met his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping for 3 hours during the Group of 20 meeting in Bali in Indonesia, and that meeting happened in November 2022. Now, this was Biden's first in-person meeting with the Chinese leader after becoming president of the United States. Then in February, we're talking about 2023 now. A lot of developments have been happening in the last number of months. In February this year, US-China ties were upended by what Washington claims were Chinese surveillance balloons flying over the United States. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken called off a planned trip to China, which was scheduled just days after this. And of course, it triggered off a lot of tensions thereafter. Now, these were, of course, on the basis of alleged surveillance China's balloon, and tensions were high. A month later, in March, on the 10th of March, China pulled off a diplomatic coup in West Asia, and the entire world was watching. They brokered a deal between arch rivals Saudi Arabia and Iran. The two nations agreed to renew ties and cooperate for greater good of West Asia, and China was the one which got all the claim for it. Just days later from here, Chinese President Xi Jinping received a grand welcome in Moscow by Russian President Vladimir Putin. Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin reaffirmed their no-limits partnership as Russia continued to pound Ukraine. Then, between June 2nd and June 4th, there were more developments. China's Defense Minister Li Shangfu turned down a meeting with US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin during the Shangri-La Defense Dialogue in Singapore. The very next day, a Chinese Navy ship cut across the path of an American destroyer in the Taiwan Strait, and the entire world took notice of that as well. Then days later, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken met Chinese President Xi Jinping and top diplomat Wang Yi in Beijing, becoming the first of 4 US cabinet-level officials to visit China over the next 2 months. 2 months later, on September 9th, US President Joe Biden had a brief exchange with Chinese Premier Li Qiang while both were at the Group of 20 summit in New Delhi. Then a week later, US National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan held a 12-hour-long talk with Chinese top diplomat Wang Yi in Malta. Then just 20 days later, on October 9th, coming to where we are now, Chinese President met a US Senate delegation led by a majority leader, Chuck Schumer. This was the first congressional delegation to visit China in 4 years. And now, just when we thought the two superpowers were working towards rapprochement, the United States broadened its export controls to stop China from acquiring advanced computer chips and the equipment to manufacture them. In the days to come, Russian President Vladimir Putin met Xi Jinping in Beijing yet again, and this was the Russian president's rare visit abroad. Putin attended China's Belt and Road Forum. Now, finally, just days before, and this is just days earlier, the big meet between Joe Biden and Xi Jinping, top Chinese diplomat Wang Yi met US counterpart Antony Blinken in Washington as the two sides laid the groundwork to hammer out details for a Biden-Xi summit. And now, here we are, hours away from perhaps one of the most highly anticipated meetings between world leaders.